Hi, this is Beru, and I'm going to walk you through healing the heroic Spine of Deathwing encounter from a Resto Druid perspective. As we get ready to land on Deathwing's back, I am going to make sure that I have Harmony active, and I'm going to get a 3-stack of Life Bloom running on my tank. Once I land, I'm going to use Regrowth to trigger Nature's Grace. I'm going to pop my Jaws of Defeat trinket, and I'm going to start blanketing Rejuves over everybody that gets the Searing Plasma debuff. I'm going to wait until these grips go out to wild growth so that people are actually taking damage and my wild growth doesn't bounce to pets because nobody's taking damage. And then I'm going to pop into Tree of Life once we roll to use Tree of Life as a mana efficient way to clear some of these extra Searing Plasma debuffs and to get people topped off. I'm just going to put Tree of Life on people and I'm going to let that Life Bloom bloom. Depending on how many Searing Plasmas are out, I'll go 1, 2, or 3 stacks. If there's not a lot of them out and I still have a lot of time left on Tree of Life, I'm going to go ahead and put 3 stacks on, and then I'm just going to let it tick off. And of course I'll use any Omen of Clarity procs to cast Regrowth on either my tank to refresh their Life Bloom or on somebody with Searing Plasma to work on getting the debuff dropped. One of the hardest parts about this fight is managing your mana, so innervate as soon as you're able to do so. Once your mana hits that 20%, even if it's 20% down with the Power Torrent, go ahead and innervate. You're going to go through a lot of mana in this fight, and you will use the mana as your innervate is ticking, so don't hesitate to innervate early and then innervate on cooldown after that. Basically, the way I heal the fight is as such. As we go through the encounter, I work to get the Searing Plasma debuff off of all of the members in the raid. The way that I handle this is I primarily utilize Rejuve, Swift Mend, and Wild Growth. I'm going to make sure that there's a Rejuve on everyone in the raid that has a Searing Plasma out, and then I'm going to Wild Growth once people take a little bit of damage to make sure that I direct that Wild Growth so it will hit the people with the Searing Plasma, and then I'm going to Swift Mend people who have the Searing Plasma so that Efflorescence will hit under them and they'll get the benefit of that Swift Mend heal. Now, as we went into the first plate, while we were waiting for that Nova to kind of explode, I utilized my Tranquility right as the amalgamation hit 9 stacks so that I could not only help clear some of those extra Searing Plasma debuffs as we go into the raid-wide damage, but also so that I could assist with healing people in the raid through that Nova. We also use a Power Word barrier there, so we have a little bit of mitigation in addition to my healing. The biggest thing I can tell you about healing that Nova damage when those amalgamations are getting ready to explode is that your raid needs to be coordinated enough that you never really take more than 2 ticks of that sort of a raid-wide AE damage there. It's healable through 3 ticks, but you really, really feel it. So it's really important that your raid coordinates. They get that amalgamation down low enough that as soon as your tank is ready to get it up there, soak up the 9 bloods and gets those stacks, that once it's at 9 and that pull starts coming out, it gets knocked down within just 2 ticks of the AE damage. My healing through the fight is basically going to be rinse and repeat. I'm going to Rejuve everybody that I can that has the Searing Plasma debuff. I am going to keep a Life Bloom rolling on my tank. If you don't need to do the extra Life Bloom healing on your tank, don't worry about keeping your Life Bloom on the tank. You can Life Bloom the Searing Plasma targets for additional healing on there. But by the time you're at the second half of the second plate, your tank's really going to need any sort of healing help that they can get. So I would suggest moving it to the tanks at that juncture. We're going to go ahead and do another roll here. We just knocked the first plate off. So again, I go through the same process. Blanket the people with Searing Plasma with Rejuve. I'm going to activate my Jaws of Defeat trinket basically on cooldown unless I'm in Tree of Life. As we get ready to roll, I pop into Tree of Life and I just work Life Blooms through the raid. I use, again, those Omen of Clarity procs for regrowths on the Searing Plasma targets or to refresh the Life Bloom that I keep on my tank. With regards, again, back to mana, if you're having trouble with mana and you're not utilizing some sort of mana regeneration trinket, my suggestion to you is to go dig out your Jaws of Defeat if you're not using it now. It doesn't matter if it's a normal version or a heroic version. You cast so much rejuve throughout this encounter that as long as you're using a significant amount of rejuve while you are have the Jaws of Defeat active, you're going to get your money's worth out of it, normal or heroic, and you should see a huge impact on your mana just making that simple change. Now, one of the things I want to talk about is other alternative ways to clear off the Searing Plasma debuff. Like I said, I rejuve it, but if your healers are pretty good and you get down to where you only have, 2 or 3 of them up at a time, it's not going to take you that much time to get the 3 rejuves out. And then in the early parts of the fight, you're like, well, what now? Obviously, use your Omen of Clarity casts to work to clear them off. But then go ahead and use Nourished or Healing Touch, depending on, how much of that absorb is left in the debuff, and work with that to assist with clearing them as well. We just pulled up our second plate right here, and it's the first time we pulled it up, and going into it again, every time on the first part of the plate, I always trank as we go into that Nova that the amalgamations do, and we rinse and repeat that. What we use for the second plate is we have another Druid that also tranks, and we have a Shaman that uses Spirit Link Totem. So don't hesitate to utilize those abilities for the second plate. Spirit Link Totem is incredibly powerful in this encounter with helping to clear those debuffs off. So if you've got more than one Shaman, definitely maximize the use of Spirit Link Totem as much as you can. It'll really help save your mana. Additionally, Priest Divine Hymns of your Holy Priest work really well, as well as Power Word Barrier and Aura Mastery from your Paladins and any Disc Priests that you might be using at the time. So what I want to go ahead and talk about, again, go back to it, I guess, is mana use. Try to get a concentration potion in for this fight. It's a 12-minute fight. It's a long encounter, and there's a fair bit of healing going on. I personally am an extremely aggressive healer, so I'm going to use every last ounce of mana that I have to get through the fight. I would recommend using your concentration potion sometime within the first 3 plate exposures, so the first half of the fight. There isn't a ton of tank damage that's going out at that time. Things are a lot less hectic, and you're going to be missed a lot less if you take the 10 seconds out to utilize your concentration potion during that time. So I would absolutely say make sure to make use of it in the first half of the fight, and definitely make use of it and time it that way. As we go into the last plate of the fight, there are a few kind of comments that I want to make with just general overall how to keep everyone alive and how to keep your healers alive. Now, I haven't really talked yet about healing the grips and what I use to heal the grips. And as you go into this third plate, it's going to be more important than anything that those grips are handled with precision, because as the fight goes on, it becomes harder and harder to keep your raid alive due to the debuff that you receive when the amalgamation dies. So the best way to handle your grips is to make sure that they're really not out for more than 4 or 5 seconds. We use 4 to 5 DPS on them, but the key to handling the grips and meeting the DPS needed for the tendon is to make sure that you don't over DPS those grips. So you want your DPS to do just enough damage to handle getting the people broken out of them, but not so much damage that they kill it before the tendon is exposed. Going into the tendon exposure, you want that corruption to be at, I don't know, 4 or 5% health, so that when it comes time for the final grip to come out for that corruption, your DPS can kill it just before it's about to grip or immediately as it grips, so that you don't lose any DPS on the tendon. The way that I handle healing the grips, I use a lot of regrowth, I use a lot of healing touch, but generally, if your DPS is doing their job correctly, there's not a lot of healing needed for the gripped people because they're not gripped but for a fraction of a second. So that's just something to keep in mind. But if they get caught in that grip for an extended period of time, really pump some heavy heals into them to help sustain their life, especially if they are debuffed. Get that debuff cleared off of them if you can, so that they don't die while they're in the grip. Now, the most important thing about the last plate phase of this fight is aggro on bloods. As a healer and as a druid, it's horrible. We mark all 3 of our tanks throughout the fight, and starting with the second plate, we have our healers stand on the kite tank because he's starting to pick up bloods during the entirety of that second plate, and he's the one that is picking up everything coming in. So it makes his job easier if the healers stand on that tank. When the kite tank starts having to move, we use the healers standing on the amalgamation, which is being tanked by a feral druid who shifts over into bear to assist with tanking on that. And the healers stand on that tank, and the bear will help swipe any of those excess bloods that come by, so that you have limited amounts of aggro. That being said, don't hesitate to call out to have healers get a hand of protection from your paladins, so that they drop the threat while that hand of protection is active, and it makes it easier for your tanks to pick them up. Try to save these for if that healer has searing plasma on them, because it will kill them so quickly with the searing plasma out if they are getting beat on by them. But if they have just so much blood aggro that they're going to die anyhow, it's really important to just go ahead, call for that bop, get them protected so that they don't die. Again, making sure that during the last 2 plates you stand on those specific tanks to make their job easier to pick up the blood is extremely important. We found a lot that druids as well as the resto shaman had the biggest problem with drawing threat and subsequently dropping threat on it. And in fact, I die at the very end here because the amalg from that corruption got missed. I had the highest healing threat. It came and just smacked me down. But outside of that, blanket rejuves, swift mend, use wild growth smartly so that it actually hits targets who can use those wild growth ticks. And good luck. It's a tough fight and a log one. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to let me know, and thank you for watching.